we're going to start now. Thanks so much for your patience. We really appreciate it. My name is Shumon Basar. I'm the Commissioner of the Global Art Forum. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the beginning of the 11th edition, Trading Places, which starts this evening, continues tomorrow in and around Sharjah, and then follows on, of course, in March during Art Dubai. I'd like to ask you all to please turn your phones to silent right now. Thank you very much. But also do feel free to tweet, Instagram, or some other social media platform that I'm too old to know about. We're using the hashtag GAF11. And also, of course, please treat yourself to the amazing spread of vernacular snacks that we have put on for you as you've come in. Chips Oman, and many other things that many of you will find familiar. I just wanted to start off with a few words about the Global Art Forum, in case there's any of you who haven't maybe been to any of them before. We turned 10 years old last year, and over that period we've tried to take the cultural temperature of our current moments in time. What we're doing, in a way, is building up a growing map of knowledge and an unwieldy geographical territory that is closer to imagination than it is to the science of geopolitical cartography. We uncover blind spots in the past which have been forgotten or erased from history. The Forum prefers continuity over pure novelty, and as such, there are always overlaps and echoes between the editions. Many of our guests often come back, building up our own memory collectively. So previous editions over the past decade have included media, language, historiography, technology, and the future. The chosen theme every year is also an opportunity to invite guest directors. They take our initial impulse into surprising and rich directions. And I'm deeply grateful to all of them, some of whom are in the audience today, for their brains and their beauty, as you can see to my right. Which brings me to my two co-directors this year, two people that need very little introduction, but here goes it anyway. Some of you may have heard of Antonia Carver. In case you haven't, as Director of Art Dubai between 2010 and 2016, Antonia played an absolutely instrumental role in willing the Global Art Forum into what it is today. She's now Director of Art Jamil and will continue to contribute to the region's artistic and cultural energy in new and exciting ways, and we're looking forward to seeing, hearing, and experiencing that in the coming months and years. To her right, Oscar Guardiola-Rivera likes to make out that his greatest skill is as a Latino dancer extraordinaire. While I would never dare to dispute this non-fake news, he's also a formidable writer, a thinker, a philosopher, and a dedicated professor at Birkbeck College, London. His book from a few years ago, What If Latin America Ruled the World, had a very profound effect on me and many others in rethinking the world from a non-Western and non-Northern perspective. You'll hear from both of them in a very short while. A few very, very important thanks and acknowledgements. So in addition to our amazing speakers and contributors, something of this scale and complexity is a huge collective effort, and we're deeply grateful to the following, our amazing forum team, Benedetta Gione, Juneda Abdul Jabbar, Salah Shaka, everyone at Art Dubai, Ben Floyd, Myrna Ayat, Nicole Khan, Rula Nasser, Leo Barameda, Millie Moss, and Fikra for their amazing design work, to Dubai Culture and Arts Authority for the sustained, generous and crucial support year after year. Here at D3 and High D3, Sadia Zahid, Umran Shah and Saif Ali Khan, thank you for this beautiful and incredible venue. Sultan Saud Al-Qasimi and Uns have been core family forever. Thank you for everything. And to all our volunteers, a massive shukran. So a round of applause for our team. So, the title, of course, is Trading Places, and the first question people ask us, why trade and why now? Well, speaking of right now, in exactly a week, a new president of the United States will be inaugurated. He spent much of his campaign waging a war of bigly words on global trade. Century pearls were eclipsed by the discovery of oil and gas, the advent of OPEC and GCC. One very vivid and visitable manifestation of trade here in Dubai, and one of my personal favorites, is Dragon Mart. Dragon Mart is the largest trading hub for Chinese products outside of mainland China. For over a decade, it's been a gateway to Middle East and North African markets. Farah Al-Qasimi, an Emirati artist, photographer, musician, has produced a specially commissioned photographic study of this special cultural and economic zone, whose slogan is, where you can find one in a million or a million of one. We are very, very happy to show her wry, witty pictures right behind us, and throughout the forum, as well as across our entire campaign. So thank you, Farah. And a new collaboration also this year is to work with Cinema Akil. And we'll be hearing about our program in March in more detail in a minute. But we'll be working with Cinema Akil, and they'll be manifesting one of their pop-ups on the last day on Friday, the 17th of March. So thank you to Butena and Luz. So just before I hand over to Antonia, here are a few questions that have been on our mind while we've been putting this program together. So the first thing is, does the trade of goods also always produce a trade of ideas? How has trade connected places in ways that are both seen and unseen? What sort of civilizations, empires, and systems of thought are born from trade? And what happens when thriving trade ends somewhere and indeed begins somewhere else? So to tell us more about her thinking and behind our trade theme, as well as details from our forthcoming program, will you please welcome Antonia Carver. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shumon. It's obviously always a pleasure to work with you over so many years, and also to now have the chance to work with Beauty and Brains on my right as well.
I'm going to believe it.
So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of micro of trade. So the idea that when pared right down, trade is really about exchange. And it's no accident that the fundamental practice of gift-giving and receiving between communities and societies since time began is the first thing that anthropology students learn in their study of the nature of human society. As humans, we really make things because we want to give them away, usually in exchange for something else. And when we give a gift or we exchange something, we give something of ourselves. So ultimately, the act of trade is an exchange of self. This simple yet really fundamental act can be on a one-on-one basis between individuals, or it can be magnified onto the world stage between societies and nations. So in the end, for me, it's trade that really binds us, whether on the micro or the macro kind of scale. And of course, then there's the flip side as well, that Shumon pointed out that in a globalized world, trade can become an ultimate bargaining chip or even a weapon of war. So this evening we kick off a journey from then until now, starting with Uzma Rizvi, a great friend of the forum, who takes her trademark compelling approach to deep history, excavating how trade manifests through ancient objects. Uzma is followed by a bit of a dream panel that I think we've been trying to get together for many years, and finally have, looking at, with a sort of real, I guess, eclectic sense of architectural and historical wisdom, with Todd Rice, Nora Al-Sayeh, and Wael Al-Awar, who is part of IBDA, who built this space around us. So keep your questions for this very space we're in. And they're going to be debating the role that trade plays in how we imagine and create buildings. Myrna Ayad, the Fair Director of Art Dubai now, brings us a tale of the exchange of the Charmanet for a de Kooning painting. And we end with a special composition by Emeka Ogbo, who's with us from Lagos for this evening. Each year we try to expand the forum programme, and tomorrow is two firsts. We're taking the forum to Sharjah for the first time, and we're taking a new kind of format of being on the move, looking at how trade is embedded in the city through a series of guided walks led by Tulip Hasba, Miriam Aldabach, and Sultan Al-Qasimi. These tours were oversubscribed, I think, within about an hour of being put online. So if you were lucky enough to get a place, then we'll see you tomorrow. If not, we'll have to tell you about it another time. We haven't announced our March programme yet, so this is just a bit of a sneak peek, what we felt for our very loyal forum audience here in Dubai. We just wanted to give you a little taste of the treats that are to come. So thinking about sites of trade, where trade is enacted, the March programme includes Omar Barada, talking about the desert as an active site of trade, or the times when the desert was alive with trading journeys. While Lale Khalili talks about today's cobwebbed seas, the nature of port cities, and the container ships that ply the waters that really took over from the desert. Turning to cities as trade hubs, Sultan Al-Qasimi will be chairing a special discussion on the gold trade, with particularly taking a focus on the relationship between Mumbai and Dubai, forged through gold and many other trade transactions, of course, through history and today. While the artists Ahmed Matar, the art scene kingpin of Jeddah, Hamza Sarafi, and the filmmaker Mahmoud Sabah, who you probably know from Baraka Meets Baraka, which recently was a good hit here and elsewhere, they're going to be discussing Jeddah and Mecca, led by curator Claire Davies, who's based at the Met. And Paul Griffiths, who's not only CEO of Dubai Airports, but also happens to be a concert organist, and who's with us here this evening as well, will discuss how the world's busiest airport works with its own kind of rhythm and its own kind of score, looking at that relationship between aeroplanes and airports and music, in a way related to what Emeka is also doing this evening, in the way that we understand the relationship between trade and music. Those are just a few of the highlights, and I think Oscar's going to pick up from me now and turn from the micro to the macro, and also talk us through a little bit more what's happening in March.
Shumon and Antonia came up with this wonderful title, Trading Places. I lovingly call it musical chairs. So maybe it is fitting that I became more interested in the frequencies, the rhythms of trade. The fact that trade can be sped up or can be very slow, the way in which it invokes the plasticity of us as subjects as much as the movement of objects around the world. An example of these peculiarity of rhythms and frequencies of trade is the fact that in the 18th and 19th century, the hope was that through trade, perpetual peace will finally come to our civilization. But that hope was betrayed very quickly when it became a recognizable fact that trade and commerce and competition bring war just as the rain clouds bring storms. So, for instance, remember that the previous century, the 20th century, was inaugurated with, by two events. The first one was the intervention in China to crush the Boxer Rebellion by a sort of coalition of the willing, a United States of the civilized nations of the world. And the second event was a threat of intervention in Venezuela, into Venezuela, issued by Britain in order to collect sovereign debt, which led the then United States of America's President Theodore Roosevelt to come up with his hyper-virile version of the Monroe Doctrine, according to which civilized nations and only civilized nations should act as an international police force vis-a-vis barbaric nations around the world. Roosevelt's doctrine was then repeated by Wilson in the years leading towards World War I. And so here we are, a week from the inauguration of yet another US president, whose name I shall refrain from uttering, as if he were a character of the Harry Potter novels, who models himself on Theodore Roosevelt in terms of the hyper-virility, in terms of his recuperation of the Monroe Doctrine, so much so that some of us in Latin America are busy getting ready for the militarization to come of the Mexican-American border, or who knows, yet another intervention into Venezuela. That example brings us back to the rhythms and the frequencies of trade. Slow, fast, something in between. Hence, the kind of rhythms that we will have in the events that we're preparing for March. Accelerate, break, funk. For accelerate, we're going to have with us the accelerationists themselves, represented by the New York-based Iranian curator Mohammad Salemi, who works very closely with one of my favorite writers right now, Reza Negarestani. We're going to have Stephanie Bailey from Hong Kong, and we're going to have the Colombian, London-based artist Oscar Murillo. And when it comes to Oscar, you never know what's going to happen. The last time he got invited to the Australian Biennale, he ripped up his British passport in midway and got deported. So we may, I ask you to be prepared for some surprising performances. Then for break, we're going to have the first of my two favorite anthropologists or anthropology-minded people in the Global Art Forum. We're going to have the Komarov's daughter, Jane Anna Gordon, who is coming up with this really interesting, amazing take on politics and political theory out of trade. She calls it creolization, creolizing politics. And to finish that day and that sequence, we're going to have funk. The Indian poetess, absolutely wonderful novelist, and marvelous dancer Tishani Doshi and I will try to dance to the poetry of trade. And then, of course, we're going to have in March one of the most exciting events of the entire program. Cristo is going to be here with us, and I believe that very few people have been able to capture, as well as him and Jean-Claude did, precisely the plasticity of the rhythms of trade in space and time, the secrecy and transparency that comes with veiling an object or unveiling it in the huge scale that is characteristic of Christo's work.